You're listening to the suitesflow podcast.
Developers often think showing less keeps them in control, relying on scarcity and these high-pressure sales tactics. But psychologically, that approach is probably the fastest way to kill their deals before they even really get started.
Yeah, it's totally counterintuitive, isn't it? But it's the core paradox, I think, of modern real estate sales. That control they're chasing. It's the very thing that pushes potential buyers away.
Absolutely. So today we are doing a deep dive into one of the most, stubborn beliefs in the development industry, this whole myth of control. Our mission really is to explore how this reliance on, let's call it high-pressure persuasion, which was kind of born in the pre-digital age, how it erodes buyer trust, and also how new technology is fundamentally shifting the focus, moving away from that brokered hand-holding towards, radical transparency and genuine buyer autonomy.
Right. And to understand why that old model just doesn't work anymore, we really have to start with basic human motivation. I mean, why does that high-touch maze, the force tour, the broker hovering over your shoulder, the insistence on explaining every little thing, why does it create such resistance?
Well, it treats the buyer like they can't figure things out for themselves, doesn't it? Like a child needing guidance. The industry seems to assume that control equals conversion, setting up this sales environment where buyers are seen as, I think one source called them passive recipients.
And that entire approach just flies directly in the face of something called self-determination theory.
Wow.
Edward Deci and Richard Ryan established it. This theory basically tells us that we humans were driven by three fundamental psychological needs.
Okay, what are those?
Autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And a typical high-pressure sales environment. It violates that first one autonomy big time, that feeling that you actually have volition, control over your own choices.
Yeah, I know that feeling. When I sense someone's trying to push me down a particular path, I instantly get my back up. It feels almost primal, that pushback.
It really is. That's psychological reactance in action. It's a concept Jack Brem detailed. Basically, when a person feels their freedom is threatened, like they're being manipulated or herded or pressured to commit before they're ready, they just build internal skepticism, resistance.
Okay.
They might be nodding politely in the sales center looking interested, but inside, they're putting up walls. They're actually preparing to say no, maybe just to reassert their own sense of control.
So the developers attempt to assert control, maybe hoping to manufacture some urgency.
Yeah.
It actually ends up manufacturing skepticism instead.
Precisely. And this is exactly why an autonomy-supportive environment is so much more effective, especially in complex sales like real estate. Research clearly shows that when individuals feel they have control over the process, their intrinsic motivation just skyrockets. They engage more deeply, they'll persist longer the research phase, and crucially, they build genuine conviction. In real estate, a buyer who's allowed to explore freely isn't being slow or indecisive. They're actually engaging their cognitive resources to truly deeply envision their future in that space.
Right. It's the difference between being told where you should live versus deciding for yourself where you want to live.
Exactly. The current industry standard seems to operate on the assumption that buyers are these indecisive lumps, right, who need external prods and nudges. But studies on decision-making complexity actually prove the opposite. Clarity simplifies the path to a decision. Control just complicates it by introducing all this external noise and pressure.
Okay, so that really sets the stage for looking at the current market status. If we know that control tends to backfire, why is this outdated, frankly expensive playbook still so common in, 2025? We have instant, abundant information everywhere, yet developers are often still acting like gatekeepers of information.
Well, it's a mix, I think. Powerful organizational inertia combined with, frankly, psychological dread. The scarcity mindset is definitely a holdover from that pre-digital era where the broker genuinely did hold all the information. But today, clinging to scarcity is mostly fear.
Fear of what exactly?
Specifically, loss aversion. This is something Kahneman and Tversky identified in prospect theory.
The fear of losing the deal.
That's the one. Sellers dread the feeling of losing a potential deal much more than they value the potential gain of securing one. So, to try and avoid that negative outcome, they sometimes withhold critical information, maybe specific price points, exact views, unit availability, hoping it manufactures some kind of artificial urgency. But this is the exact moment trust just implodes.
Because when information is restricted, the buyer's default reaction is suspicion. They immediately think, okay, what aren't they telling me? What are they hiding?
Absolutely. Trust, which Julian Rotter defined basically as the expectation of reliability, it gets shattered instantly when information is just dribbled out in pieces. The buyer naturally infers hidden flaws. You know, that light, airy 35th floor unit they fell in love with in the glossy brochure. Suddenly, when they dig deeper, maybe there's a noisy exhaust fan right outside the window, and they never saw that coming because they only ever saw the generic model unit.
That kind of mismatch must lead to massive frustration and probably a lot of abandoned leads.
It's linked straight to cognitive dissonance. That's Leon Festinger's classic theory about the uncomfortable tension between what you expect and what the reality is. If teaser ads and vague marketing paint this hyper-idealized picture, the moment the buyer shows up and sees the inevitable mismatch, whether it's price, view, layout, whatever, the frustration is huge, they drop out. And that misalignment, it's toxic for the developer.
And it costs the developer twice, doesn't it? First, they burn money acquiring that misaligned lead in the first place, and then they suffer the reputational damage when that lead walks away angry, maybe posts online about it.
Precisely. Mystery breeds misalignment. And misaligned buyers don't just disappear quietly. They tend to leverage the negativity bias. You know, the psychological finding that bad experiences tend to outweigh good ones, often by like 5 to 1. They broadcast negative word of mouth. They rewrite the developer's story online. Oh, that place was totally overhyped. They tried to trap me. So the developer spends huge sums on marketing, only to generate negative PR because the buyer felt like they were constantly guessing what they were actually buying.
Okay, so this control paradigm burns cash, it risks reputation, and it fundamentally violates core human psychological needs. The only logical solution, then, seems to be radical transparency and empowerment. It sounds like the key insight here is that buyers actually crave clarity more than they crave assistance or hand-holding.
They absolutely do. When developers shift to full transparency, revealing the hard data, the availability, specific details up front, they effectively eliminate uncertainty aversion. That's the psychological tendency we all have to avoid ambiguous options. Full disclosure empowers the buyer to perform a proper, rational evaluation.
And it allows the buyer to start doing what Richard Thaler called mental accounting, right?
Yeah.
They can actually begin budgeting, fitting the purchase into their life, imagining it before a broker even gets involved.
And that pre-commitment, that's gold. And critically, the common industry fear that giving the buyer control will just slow down the deal. It's entirely false. Autonomy actually fosters the flow state. That's Mihaly's concept of deep immersion and engagement.
Right, that moment when you're just fully absorbed in something and time seems to disappear.
Yes, exactly. A buyer who's in flow is exploring deeply, they're vividly visualizing their life in that property, and they're building conviction without any external pressure. Control is actually an interruption. It introduces extrinsic pressure that snaps the buyer out of that flow state. So paradoxically, autonomy leads to faster, more confident decisions because the commitment is intrinsic. It's self-generated, not coerced.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense. Let's turn then to the solution that makes this kind of autonomy possible, especially at scale. The company we're looking at today, suitesflow, has developed what they call the Clarity Framework. And it seems designed specifically to eliminate ambiguity by providing tools that, frankly, didn't really exist before in this integrated way.
Right. The first and arguably the most significant differentiator is their ability to generate unit-specific virtual tours. Now, this isn't just a generic tour of a staged model apartment. We're talking about the ability to generate a fully navigable, realistic walkthrough for every single unit in a building, even if there are 1,000 units, and crucially, even if those units haven't actually been built yet.
Wow, okay. That immediately solves the, yeah, but what will my specific view look like?
Yeah.
Big problem. Which, as you said, is probably the biggest source of that cognitive dissonance later on.
Exactly. They generate these really immersive, high-fidelity experiences directly from existing architectural assets, things like floor plans, construction drawings, material specs. This completely eliminates the huge expense and the time sink involved in building and photographing dozens of physical model units.
And the experience is completely accurate to the data, which builds that feeling of competence for the buyer you mentioned earlier.
Correct. The second key differentiator is the POI interactive map, POI meaning points of interest. This lets users intuitively understand the building's environment, everything beyond its walls. They can instantly see nearby schools, transit routes, grocery stores, parks, all those critical practical details that really determine livability. It grounds the dream in day-to-day reality.
Makes sense. And third, there's AI guidance. How does that differ from, say, a standard website chatbot?
Well, crucially, their AI guidance is based only on real, verified building data that's extracted directly from the architectural models and specifications. It's not pulling from marketing copy or making guesses, so it helps users find the right unit based on their precise, stated needs like, show me available units above the 20th floor with a northeast exposure and at least 2 bathrooms. This eliminates the need for a broker to waste time asking all those basic qualifying questions up front.
The scale of this solution seems to be the real headline, though. The source material positions this company, suitesflow, as the only company in the world capable of generating these unit-specific tours at this massive scale. For both unbuilt and existing properties, it basically makes clarity the default setting, not the exception.
And that scale enables some incredible psychological benefits through immersion. These unit-specific tours allow for really vivid mental simulations. They activate what neuroscientists sometimes call somatic markers, those kind of emotional previews that help guide our decisions. A buyer is effectively simulating living in that specific space, building emotional ownership just by exploring the light, the flow, the views, all unpressured.
And I suppose the more time they spend exploring without pressure, the more they actually start to like it, is that right?
Yeah, that's basically the mere exposure effect, which Zhejiang originally described. Simple familiarity tends to breed affinity. Repeated, unpressured exploration increases the buyer's attachment to that specific unit. Plus, they self-filter early on. If the layout of Unit 14B just doesn't work for them, they dismiss it immediately online, saving the broker from a potentially misaligned and wasted meeting down the line. So the people who do stick around and eventually make contact, they're already deeply pre-qualified and highly interested.
Right. Now, none of this massive scale generating potentially thousands of unique, accurate virtual environments would be possible without some serious technology underneath it all. What's the proprietary engine that's actually driving this?
So that engine is called VIM. It stands for Volumetric Information Multiplier. And VIM is really the core intellectual property that enables both the scale and the accuracy we've been talking about. To keep it accessible, you can think of VIM as a kind of master synthesis engine. It doesn't just render pretty pictures. It integrates and synthesizes all the different data streams: architectural, geospatial, visual data, material specs, everything.
Okay, so it's not just stitching together photos or generic 3D models. It's using real, verified data points to construct an accurate, volumetric digital twin of each specific unit.
Precisely. And that verification aspect is the key trust builder here. Even when the physical building is maybe just a foundation in the ground, VIM reconstructs the entire structure with data-driven reliability. This means the external views from a specific window, the sun angles at different times of day, the precise floor plan dimensions, everything is mathematically accurate and true to that specific unit's data.
That level of data integrity must be what allows suitesflow to confidently replace the old, expensive, often inaccurate process of manual renderings and physical model units with these verifiable digital environments.
It essentially eliminates both the expensive manual labor and the guesswork simultaneously. It fundamentally shifts the entire sales conversation away from, well, this is what we hope it will look like, towards this is what the data proves it will look like. It builds trust without having to rely on hype or persuasion.
So this whole deep dive really reveals a pretty foundational shift happening, or at least possible now. Real estate sales seem to be moving away from that high-pressure pitch built on manufactured scarcity and control, towards an environment built on unguided conviction, transparency, and ultimately, trust.
Yeah, and it means developers can eliminate so much wasted time and resources spent on misaligned buyers. The buyers who eventually connect with a broker after they've self-filtered using these immersive, data-rich tools, they aren't just lukewarm prospects, they're high-intent leads who have essentially already convinced themselves.
The focus stops being about who can talk the most people into buying something and starts being about who can provide the clearest, most accurate, most trustworthy picture of the actual product.
Absolutely. And the broker's role evolves too. It shifts from being a gatekeeper and persuader to becoming more of a highly efficient advisor or facilitator, basically closing deals with individuals who have, in a sense, already mentally moved in.
And that leaves us with our final conviction statement for you, the listener, to consider. When the truth becomes visual, trust becomes automatic.
That's an elegant summary of what feels like a really critical shift in the industry.
See you in the next episode.
You're listening to the suitesflow podcast.